rehearsal rooms, and the various function spaces that are already in place. We do have substantial parking already on campus, both adjacent and very nearby, and that would be seen to be a significant advantage. Similarly, we have the halls of residence, which are available for hostel type accommodation outside of teaching. We have reasonably good public transport links via the Orbiter and various key bus routes, and those bus routes we're planning to expand. The park environment that the campus exists on is very suitable for outdoor performances and large-scale concerts and cultural events, for example, kapahaka type competitions and festivals. We would propose that this obviously would have access to the various campus cafes and social spaces that already exist on campus, and if the development was to go ahead, we'd be looking to expand on those facilities. The spaces that we have already also allow for substantial catered style dinner events. And also, I think importantly, the transport links in and around the city through Wairiri Drive, which will be extended by the completion of the Waikato Expressway, providing patrons particularly from the eastern side, very easy access to the venue, and also from part of the wider region from Cambridge, Morrinsville, Matamata and beyond. So there's some of the benefits that we think we can provide from the existing facility that's in place.
Okay,
thank you, David, Mayor Julie and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to present this. From my perspective, I've always thought that an architecturally designed iconic building, something like most of the other countries in Europe have, and especially Sydney, would be absolutely fabulous on our campus. The ambience there, the lake, and all the space that we have there. From my perspective as a tourist and singer around the world, the opera houses and concert venues are always outside of the city centre. You always cross town, cross the river to go to the theatre. And I see that as being hugely important here in Hamilton. I think Hamilton has the chance to put itself on the map, to become not just the poor relation of Auckland, not just the cow town that it's always been known as. Since I've come back, this place has grown hugely. And I would like to see that they take the advantage at this moment of putting a really iconic building in a really great space at the university. I see that the centre of town is for the more upmarket cafes, for the inner city living, for the places you go for your birthdays and celebrations. If you go to the opera and you go to the theatre, you've got plenty of parking. You will have smaller cafes, just like Sydney has around the Sydney Opera House, where you can have a bite to eat, a glass of wine before and after the show. There'll be plenty of parking spaces and places to drop people off right at the door, north, east and south exits from this sort of building. The building itself enhances, as David and Alistair have said, what we've already got on campus. Plenty of space for all sorts of entertainment and activity. Salzburg is the smallest city in Europe, and you cross the river from the centre of town to get to the Opera House under the mountain. The space around that Opera House, cafes, small cafes, not the big dining cafes, but the smaller places, the drink, have a wine before you go, and you can be dropped at the door, and the walking is not very far. Plenty of car spaces underground there. Just to mention one in Europe, but if you think of any city in Europe, they all have a river. Hamilton has a river. We've never made the most of the river. You can have your cafes, your beautiful places sitting on the river, but not a great big, huge square or whatever sort of building to house a concert hall and an opera centre. That just squashes it in. You've got plenty of room in the main street of Hamilton to have inner city living, beautiful cafes, lots of recreation along the riverbank, lovely walks. And at the university, you've got the huge space to build this iconic building. It will attract tourists, people will come here to see the building and to see the unbelievable space at the university, the grounds, the lake, the ambience. It's as good as the Hamilton Gardens, and that is something to be proud of too. And I think somebody spoke about the Claudelands Showgrounds. Well, that is a fabulous place for big events, for big pop stars who come here and need 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people to go. This is a really special place that I'm talking about at the university. That will be an iconic building to go and see, a place to visit, to sit and look at the scenery, to look at the building and to go inside. It needs a proper stage. I've even thought about a fourth wall that might open out for a summer-winter venue, something that is done in other places in Europe. It's not absolute, but it's a possibility if you get the right architect. The orchestra's in the centre, against the fourth wall, you might say. All the dressing rooms and other places are designed to go around it, but that wall could go down in the summer and you could have summer concerts on the lake, across the lake. A lovely bridge connecting the two buildings maybe, if they're not built side by side, but that's not the issue. The fact is that the space is there for this possibility. I believe that Hamilton has the opportunity to put itself on the map if you just get the spaces right. I think that the Founders Theatre has been a fabulous place in its day, and I think the sports grounds there, the cricket grounds, the rugby grounds, and all of that area could be absolutely fabulous for going to sports. Again, small restaurants, small places to have a little drink and what have you, to go to the rugby or whatever, and put the cultural centre on the other side of the river. And remember that we are only a small town, but we are growing. We've got Aucklanders coming in from north, south, east and west, really. You know, the northern part of Hamilton has unbelievable growth. The eastern side of Hamilton is going to go, we know that, and Cambridge area is already on its way. So I think, look to the future, be a Sir Dove Robinson, and do it now. Don't wait for 20 years and people say, oh, if only they'd done that. Just look at the possibilities. Don't miss us out, please.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Mallett for a question.
Thank you. Would the university put any money in?
It's in their paper.
Yes, that is in our submission. We do at some stage have to extend the academy. At the moment it has about 33% on average community use. We would like that to be more. That means we're going to have to expand for further teaching space anyway. We're prepared to put 5 million plus the land into the initially. When the academy was built, the city put 2 million in. The university raised the rest of the money for the $15 million. So we have experience of doing that and working with the community to develop community assets, and that's how most of our developments are being done, is to focus on the community.
Thank you. And secondly, particularly Dame Malvina's comments, currently the Founders Theatre, a big part of the constituency who uses that is actually the lower end. When I say lower end, I mean the young kids, the ballet classes, the etc. Is what you're suggesting going to be able to satisfy that need?
Absolutely, we've already got that there. That's already established. We have in the building, in the academy as it stands now, we have the small concert chamber of 300 seats. We have 3 other spaces. We have a dance studio, specially designed for dance, mirrors all the way around it. We have a whare, which is huge, bigger than that space, and we have a playhouse, which has a rise in the middle, which can come up and it has, you know, people can sit around and see the plays on top of the stage. Okay,
so from that, why were, if that's correct, why were people still using, you know, these community type groups? Were you too expensive, or was it just not? And it may be just...
Excuse me, but we teach in that space. That's why the university have got to give us another building to teach in. Excuse me, but interrupting.
Not like you're pushing a barrow, eh?
No, I'll work on that one. I think one of the things for us, even moving graduation from Founders, was really in terms of making it 1,500 seat. So what we're seeing here is we have already a number of facilities around. Say a new building, a new build would, and a theatre would allow us to have a greater number of seats. And I think that's what's important. And look, I've taken my own students to dance at the Founders. Again, that's been fairly full by the time you take some of the dance things. So 1,500 seat theatre would be, I think, used by the community, and that's the way we would see it. Already some of those community facilities we have on campus are not being maximised simply because we don't have enough space and room.
Okay, so one of the problems with the bigger facilities, Claudelands, for example, is that they, and that our rugby stadium, you know, we were promised that that was going to have club rugby on it on Saturdays and whatnot. Then what lo and behold, it's incredibly expensive to open up the stadium for a club rugby final. Will we run? And now I know you've got an agreement with us regarding community usage of the Gallagher as it is now. Sure. That when we say community use, that means subsidised, non-charge, or some degree of
Sure.
mitigation like that. Is that what you'd be expecting here as well?
Absolutely. I mean, in the main, what we would do is be able to expand this teaching space so the community would have greater use. We'd have more flexibility in bookable rooms if we had the larger facility. So our difficulty is at the moment is making sure that Dame Malvina can use the concert chamber for her classes at the same time as keeping it free from the community.
Okay.
If we had a larger facility there, we can keep the smaller classes, the smaller groups going in parallel with the larger facility. So it maximises community use. It also allows, I think, for greater flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Alistair, if we just take away Founders Theatre for a moment.
Sure.
The university was planning on stage 2 of the academy. So again, without Founders Theatre being in the equation, what would that have given you, the university, in terms of stage 2? And what was the cost?
Sure. Thanks, Councillor Chesterman. I think the key thing there was that at the moment we're doubling up on teaching space. So stage 2 was to release the current space we've got there for more focused teaching. So stage 2 was to get the teaching rooms, small orchestra rooms, the voice rooms, rather than using the bigger facilities there.
So there was no suggestion of an extra mini theatre or...
No, because our teaching space is the difficulty for us to free up the other space for community use.
Okay.
And so the cost to do that,
Is
5, 7, 10 million?
Yeah, between $5 and $10 million, depending on how many rooms Dame Malvina wants.
And there's no issue with the university.
Doesn't work like that here.
It doesn't work in our place like that either.
And there's no issue with Tainui granting the use of the land. That would be a natural part of the university.
That would be part of the... I don't see any substantive issue with that. I think we haven't had any issues opening up the rest of the campus for community. Balloons over Waikato, 80,000 people on campus. We've managed the parking for that. We've managed bus routes, so I don't see any difficulty. These things are all part of negotiation, of course,
Sure.
but I don't see any roadblocks at the moment.
And in terms of the use of stage 2, expanded now, bring in the Founders equation and expanded beyond just the teaching space. Do you see that operating potentially the same way as the Academy does, where there was an agreement with Energy Trust and in particular Hamilton City Council for, I think, 48% community use, which has been achieved over the years in the reports to Council? Is that how you might see that? Because it goes from more of a teaching space to a pure commercial space. Sure. Where commercial groups will come in and charge a good fee, and you would charge a fee for the use of the facility.
Absolutely. I think one of the things is we'd have to look at the commercial model, and we're not set on that. But if you have a 1,500 seat facility or whatever size is determined, that would have to operate on a commercial basis. But you wouldn't be paying as bigger overheads as if you were having to have it purchase the land or you weren't using it for other things. We wouldn't use a 1,500-seat facility all the time as a university.
Yeah.
So
You
therefore,
could use it for graduation.
but graduations would be fantastic. One of our difficulties, of course, is that we don't bring people onto the campus enough because we don't have those kinds of facilities.
So do you think that Professor Quigley might be looking well beyond 5 million as a contribution from the university?
These things are negotiable.
And perhaps a
Okay.
contribution from TGH?
I think these things are all negotiable.
Thank you.
Councillor Leary?
Thank you. I'm a little bit confused now. I read from your submission that you're suggesting that basically the new founders can be integrated, expanded, joined up with the Gallagher's Performing Arts Centre. But in response to the Deputy Mayor's question, you said, I picked up that the tension for your expansion is around teaching space.
No. If the Deputy Mayor asked what would we have done, we would have actually deferred what we would do if we have to expand the academy without any other things on the agenda like replacement of founders or another theatre, would be increase the teaching space. That is our planned stage 2.
Okay, so my original questions then are, we heard from Creative Waikato this morning, and they consulted directly with the sector, and certainly over the years that I've been on council, we've constantly heard that really there are two distinctly different requirements from the choir and the orchestras and the performing arts. There's an indication from Creative Waikato that possibly we actually, to solve that problem, we need 2 facilities. We've also heard that the Gallagher Performing Arts Centre is the best in the country around delivering that acoustic requirement that those that particular sector needs. Is it a possibility that the city funds a new rebuild founders theatre somewhere in the CBD, and that the university can expand and deliver the extended requirement for that concert chamber? Is that a possibility?
The concert chamber is limited in its current structure
Yeah.
with the acoustics and can't be expanded. What we want to do is have extra teaching space because we can free up that space for greater community use. So we can't expand, if you like, front or back to create a larger space on that chamber at the moment.
It's a perfect size as a chamber for chamber music and for what the university has used it for up till now.
Right.
We would still...
And Opus.
Yes, and Opus. We would still hire that. We would still want that for our small productions. But we haven't got teaching spaces. All of that frees up then for us to teach.
Right. And so just a follow-up question, then if I may, we, in many of the submissions from those groups, they are saying that the seating numbers at your centre are not enough for that concert chamber events. Is that correct?
That's right, it's 300 seats.
It's only 300 seats.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Councillor Gallagher?
Yes.
Don't let me down. You've been going so well with your questions. You're the gold star performer, Councillor
Well,
Gallagher.
I as a new councillor, I thank you for your advice. As an old councillor, I would say that's patronising, but as a new councillor, I'll thank you for the advice. I acknowledge, first of all, I acknowledge Dame Malvina's link to Sir W. Robinson around vision, but my question is not now directed at Dame Malvina. When this theatre was built, there was an assumption it was going to be truly a community theatre, and I think it is symbolic that you have not mentioned in your submission the substantive capital grant of the council on behalf of the ratepayers and the contribution to annual operational cost. In terms of administration of this theatre, and I'm trying to get the balance between, and if I went there with respect, as I've said before, I wouldn't have a clue that the ratepayers have made that contribution. Fantastic what you do at the moment. But how would you see this, the balance between, educational purpose, very important, obviously,
Sure.
And a broader community purpose, and how might that look in terms of the administration of such a facility?
I think, well, first of all, I didn't finish my submission just because Dame Malvina was being so eloquent, but one of the things in there was I was going to say that community and the city council put in 2 million, and then I said, and then there was 15 million from the wider community for community use. So, and one of the things is that we made that commitment that we would have the use at least 25%, and it's been running on average at 33% for community use. The if we would see the 1,500 seat theatre being predominantly used for community use. So I saw that as being predominantly used for community use, and we would pay for that use the same way as we pay for the academy now. So I don't see.
Would you see a sort of kind of an independent? I'm not sure. Forgive me, I'm a bit vague as to the exact administration.
Sure.
You know, because what I'm trying to do is branding. This is a community, you know, theatre, and there's huge educational component.
Sure.
Would you see some sort of independent trust running it, administering it, and particularly around some branding? Because and it's not a contradiction to have community and university branding, but I'm just trying to get the balance here, given the huge investment.
Sure, we wouldn't. I mean, there are a number of buildings that are, for example, in Tauranga at the moment. You know, as you'll be aware, the community is giving the university or the tertiary partnership $35 million, really. So that has got $15 million from the regional council, $15 million from the Energy Consumers Trust, and that's an example. And then the university's putting in another 25. So it's an example of valuing up something to 60 million. And then we look at the partnership on how that's run, and at the moment, that will be the KPIs against that will be managed through a trust of the funders. So I see no problem moving forward that we can find the appropriate model to provide the facility.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe?
Yeah, my question is really around that, and I just wondered whether the university had thought through in terms of the offer as to whether or not the facility would eventually become a city asset rather than a university asset. Let's say it was built for 50 million and 5 million had been, or slightly more, as Deputy Mayor Chesterman has indicated the university might come to the party for. But let's say 5 million was put in by the university. Would the intent be that once completed, the facility would become an asset of the city, rather than the model that we've operated with the Gallagher Centre, where we've both been contributing?
Sure. Well, I mean, absolutely. I think, you know, these things are yet to be decided. With the Gallagher one, of course, there was 2 million from the city, and then there were a whole lot of other donors that lined up.
Yep.
If there was money put in by the city, and this is a pretty common model around the world, where you have a city facility on a university campus. It's pretty, in the US, for example, this is not unusual, where you have a city facility on a campus and a governance structure around that is developed to reflect the notion of ownership. So what we're doing here is consistent with what happens around the world. We just don't do it very often in this country.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Tooman?
Question to Dame Malvina. You talked about, I think it was called a fourth wall, which you open up to the outdoors sort of thing. Yes. Would that be similar to what I refer to as the Bowl of Brooklyn in New Plymouth?
Yeah, well, it would look like that when the wall was down, okay. Yes. And the orchestra, if you imagine, this is the auditorium, so the orchestra is here against this wall, and the seats are out there. In the summer, that wall can disappear, and the orchestra simply turns around, and that faces out over the lake or faces out over the park, and it becomes I can't think what the word is, of the ones that are around the world that we know about, where they have these amazing outdoor concerts.
Theatres, yeah. And what would the...
I mean, that's a whim. It's not
okay.
a necessity.
No, I just like the idea. What would the number of... how big an audience would you be able to actually take when that happened?
Well, you could get...
5,000?
What does the balloon festival have?
80,000?
80,000 people.
Okay.
You know, across the lake, around the lake. I mean, it's huge. Sorry, huge area for. And the balloon festival. I don't know how many people attend that. So I mean, they're 60,000, 60 to 80,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Who's counting? Yeah.
It is a whim. I mean, it's not a necessity, but it's something that if Hamilton is growing as it is growing and the people are coming in to live here, we need to think about these things for the future.
Right. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much, Alistair, David and Dame Malvine, for coming along and for your well-written paper. It's been very helpful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, the next speaker I've got is Jason Wade. Hi, Jason. How are you? You're speaking on behalf of Clarence Street Theatre. Have I got that right?
Rip this one out, though.
Indeed.
Fantastic. You've got 10 minutes allocated, but that does include question time. Okay.
I'm sure. Morning, everyone. Hamilton needs a premier performance venue. It's incomprehensible that the city that is touted to grow beyond 200,000 people in the coming decades does not have such a facility. It should not be it will do or a plaster on a weeping wound or sore, but a solution to an issue that has hindered the city for years. This won't be cheap, any way we look at it. There will be opposition to spending vast amounts of money. There will be resistance to the opportunity to be bold. I urge you all to take the bull by the horns and give yourselves a legacy for the city. No one will remember a councillor that saved ratepayers a few $100s a year. They will, however, remember a council that has a vision to build a future proof technically with superior arts facilities showcasing our city as a leader in the arts sector. I recently spent time in the Civic Theatre in Invercargill, a city with just over 50,000 people. Their Civic Theatre was built in 1906 and underwent a $15.8 million upgrade in 2004-2005. That project turned the complex into a much applauded performing arts and events facility that seats 1,015 people. It features state-of-the-art equipment to make it one of the most best theatres in New Zealand for live performance. Hamilton should have something of this standard at the very least. It is everything that we need and then some. If a small provincial city like Invercargill can have such a facility, surely we should be able to do so. The university has just offered their submission to build a new theatre on their campus and contribute money and land, etc. This is actually sort of finishing off their staged performing arts venue that was already planned. The venue, without a doubt, is stunning and world class, but it's also a venue that the Hamilton City Council has sunk a large amount of money into. It's a teaching venue that is not appropriate to be the city's premier performing arts venue. The intention of council money contributed was that it was 30% for community use, is my understanding. That this just isn't practical, nor is it realistic, and I would argue how you look at the numbers if it's actually been realised. This is a teaching facility and hinders any community group trying to stage something in the space. This applies to touring productions also. I personally have had that experience. Taking performing arts away from the city, it's not just another nail in the coffin for the CBD, but this may help the university, but it will not help the city. I completely support the university building such a facility, but this should be on their own, with their own resources for their individual needs. The university is not the location for the city's premier venue. Location, I believe, is key to the success of the venue and the peripheral benefits of investing so much money into a facility. The CBD is the obvious place for any new theatre. While Founders is technically in the city, it's on the fringe in reality. Imagine an arts facility bringing people to where the action is. Theatres, restaurants, cafes, bars, galleries, riverwalks, all in the same precinct. It sounds like a world-class city, like Melbourne, Sydney or London. And we can be, and we should be. There are murmurs out there that business leaders with large amounts of cash want to leave a legacy of an art gallery. There is also the interest out of Auckland from the likes of the Wallace Foundation to sink money into such a facility. Why not combine into a much larger arts facility with a world-class art gallery and performing arts auditorium on the river, all in one? Kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. Let it have two primary uses. Any new theatre auditorium should be designed for its primary end use. It needs to accommodate the ballet, the orchestras, choral performances. However, these art forms will need to realise a small compromise. The primary sustained highest use of Founders Theatre is musical theatre. At 1,247 seats, Founders was barely ever full. The NZSO usually attracted 500 or so people. The ballet was often larger crowds. But if you look at it forensically at the numbers that have attended Founders in the past 50 years, clearly the greatest numbers by a significant amount is musical theatre. The average audiences for musical theatre in the past 50 years are beyond 2,000 people per year. Orchestral and ballet events just do not come close to these numbers, while they do not come close to these numbers. While Claudelands is now trying to house some of these events, it just will not work. Claudelands can be seen as a part-time solution. While Hamilton Operatic Society have been promised to use Claudelands for Mary Poppins next year, they're still waiting to hear if they can actually have the booking or what configuration it will be. This is 3 months down the track. The recent NZSO concert at Claudelands demonstrates either a lack of audience attendance or the fact that orchestral events aren't suited to Claudelands. Christchurch City Council spends over $80,000 per concert to make NZSO fit into the arena in a similar configuration that was achieved at Claudelands. It looked great, and by all accounts it sounded fine too, but at what cost and for how many people? Claudelands is a world-class venue and designed for what it was, but not for what we need for our theatre. It's just too big. There's been talk about the new theatre's seating capacity, whether 2,000 seats is required. We need to stick to around the same number we have, 1,000 to 1,200. This will still accommodate growing audiences in the future. There has also been talk about needing it to be smaller and more intimate. I ask why. We have two perfectly good theatres that could achieve the smaller, intimate configuration. The Meteor seating at around 200 and Clarence Street Theatre at 550. Why would you cannibalise their audience when, if such events are required, these venues should be used or used as pointed in their direction? In my previous submission, I expressed the need for expediency on the decision, as we should not be without a premier performing arts venue any longer than we need to be. I would like to clarify that expediency that it should not be at the cost of thorough investigation of business outcomes and needs. With a proper and robust investigation, there will be clear outcomes, and this will hopefully alleviate some of the angst about making such an onerous decision. On a final note, early in the piece, I approached management to be able to borrow surplus equipment left from Founders Theatre to support both Meteor and Clarence Street Theatre due to their increased usage capacity and due to the limited and old equipment that was left when gifted. There are 3 theatres that have been removed from HCC control or closed, and it would be difficult to believe that there is not spare or unused equipment. These are community assets that would be greatly help in achieving even better outcomes for our community and users. We don't want them to be gifted. We'd be happy to maintain and care for any equipment while it's not in use at Founders or the new theatre. It would enable us to build resources to purchase our own equipment. We're currently spending thousands of dollars monthly to hire an equipment we need for our users. These requests to borrow, the request to borrow was declined. I asked the elected members if they would reconsider this request, as I think we'll also find that research conducted by Creative Waikato may indicate that this is a community desire also. All the very best for what is, no doubt, a very difficult decision. And
Okay.
yes, thank you.
So, Councillor Mallett, question?
Thanks, Jason. Dame Mavora talked about, and
Dame Malvina.
Malvina, sorry, I beg your pardon. My M's all mixed up. That cities overseas, and I should have asked her when she was here, to be honest, across the river, she talked about away from the CBD, and with all due respect, she's not here to answer now. I didn't find much evidence to suggest why that happened. You're clearly arguing the other way, back in the CBD or fringe CBD. Can you bolster your argument a wee bit, please?
I guess if you're trying to establish a facility that attracts vibrancy, that attracts people, that attracts greater use, I think the CBD, especially in Hamilton's case.
Just to be clear, when you say CBD, do you mean the existing site or the existing
No,
site?
I think it needs to move
CBD?
closer into the heart of the city.
Okay.
I think the Founders location has been fine, but it's got its own problems. But I think with this opportunity, I think it is an opportunity to move it closer to where the heart of things is. With the new river plan, with all of the great things that are going on for the central city, it doesn't make sense to move a potentially integral part of revitalising that area to a suburb, because essentially the university is in a suburb. Yeah. It's not close to the city, it's not just across the river. It's not as though we can, it does have a nice lake, and the university has amazing facilities without a doubt. But I wouldn't be convinced that, I think it's too far away for the city.
The CBD, I mean, you've heard people say that the existing site is deficient for car parking. The CBD would be deficient times 2, wouldn't it?
But
car
how,
parking?
but how many, there's actually quite a few public car parks within the CBD. You've got Knox Street, you've got, there's Alexander Street, and all of these are actually within walking distance to where you could put the arts complex. I think, yes, it could be an issue, but I think it's something that can be looked at, and I think if you looked at it close enough, then I think it's not an issue that's insurmountable.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Gallagher.
Just Creative Waikato and yourself have talked about sort of appropriate, transition arrangements, and you've talked about the issues of lending and borrowing. Can I give you a scenario? Say this was a sort of a 6, 7, 8 year type of transition. What are the key things council would need to do to ensure that groups and all of the groups still survive during that transition?
I guess very generously that the Hamilton City Council has gifted the theatres, and I think people are aware that they're operating very well. They're delivering fantastic outcomes. One of the things that is holding us back is the equipment that we have. The equipment that we left was old, virtually used, past its use-by date. But at the same time, it's all very generous. However, those are the things that are holding us back now. There is spare equipment, and it would be great if we could perhaps borrow or lend or whatever's appropriate, or the council or the staff felt comfortable with.
Sure, and you also about the Claudelands, how could that improve? I'm just picking up, and it's like you're trying to put a round peg in a square hole, a square peg in a round hole. One of the ways.
What's wrong with
I think, look, it's a fantastic facility, but I think we need to be using it for what it was designed for. Not trying to fit other events that could be going at the Meteor or that could be going at Clarence Street, or I just think it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. I hear that. It's just the transitional arrangement I was talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason, for your speech and for the information you provided. So, councillors, we're now, because, as I said earlier, we'll be moving around a little bit with the run sheet. So we're now going to have a presentation from Jeff Krieger, who Jeff was down to come tomorrow, but he's now here. Now, his submission is the one second to last on the list. So his submission number is 2159. And for those of you referring to the written material, pretty much it's the second to last one in the booklet. If you flick down on your electronic, second to last one. And just before we get started, Jeff, councillors, I'm going to ask Sean Murray just to address a couple of those issues about equipment at the end of today, because there's been a few mentions of those. So we'll just get him to give us a bit of a summary on some of that at the end of the day. Okay. Right. So Jeff, welcome along. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
So we've allocated you 5 minutes, and that includes time for questions.
Yep.
So, and you've got a good written piece here that we've read as well. All right, off you go.
Thank you for this submission process. It is far superior to the community engagement sessions, which are all fluff and no substance. The consultation was premature. With a little seismic information, the cost of refurbishment has escalated by $6 million in just 1 year. Until we get the full seismic report, the refurbishment figure is a best guess. One of the architects with the winning Ferrybank proposal, and heavily involved with the other theatre upgrades, believes the cost of a new theatre has been vastly underestimated by council. He estimates the cost of a new theatre will be probably a lot closer to $100 million. Doesn't give the ratepayer much confidence in the figures proposed. The consultation went outside Hamilton for viewpoints. This stance is morally corrupt, giving a free ride to the neighbouring districts. If they're to have a say, they should also bear some of the cost. Hamilton residents attend events in Auckland, Tauranga and Rotorua. These cities don't give us a say. Creative Waikato has been lobbying for a dedicated performing arts centre, insisting that it must be on the river, neglecting the fact that large vehicle access is required, especially for touring events. Isn't it ironic that the arts community want a purpose-built venue funded by the ratepayer at the same time as Finch Rating Agency was wary of city finances? More recently, Waikato University announced a proposal to build a theatre which would conduct all of their graduation ceremonies. another loss of a user at a city council venue, potentially negating the need for Founders Theatre. Just this week, Dame Malvina Major said forget Founders and supported a theatre at the university. The funding options proposed for Founders Theatre are by borrowing, funded solely by the Hamilton ratepayer. Another option would be to crowd-fund it. That would give a clear mandate of the willingness to pay. And an alternative option would be to give Founders Theatre to the creative sector. They could have the facility exactly as they want it, where they want it, with little or no negotiation or compromise with council regarding its future. I believe that council has three options: gift it to the arts sector, demolish it, or crowd-fund it. Thank you.
Jeff, questions, anyone? Pasco.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your contribution today. Did you, just on reflection, did you take some comfort from Leonard Gardner's presentation this morning in terms of another funding option that would at least, from the way I interpreted Leonard's presentation, would at least cap the city's contribution towards a new theatre?
Yeah, I did, but I'm a bit wary of, you've got a similar case in Blenheim with the Marlborough Theatre, and that cost has just escalated astronomically. And you know, this council has no good record when we look at the likes of Claudelands.
Yeah, except this model would be quite different, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but when you're on the funding correction on the cost proposal for a new theatre, $50 million, and one of the architects says it's twice that much, well, where are we going? You know, it's all right to say, hey, we've got an alternative funding model, and I accept that, but what is the cost?
Right, other questions for Jeff? Okay. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for the way you articulated very clearly your position. Right, councillors, we're moving around again. This time we're going to welcome Roger Lovelace. Roger, hello, how are you today? Now, you'll find his submission a few lines down. He was due to come after lunch. He's number 313. Welcome along, Roger. Good to see you again.
Marina.
Now, you've got 5 minutes, and that includes time for questions.
Okay. I see on my submission I said rebuild the Founders Theatre as an idea. Preferred option. The only reason I put that preferred option was that the engineering reports and everybody else seems to think that the building itself is no longer safe for its original purpose. I think we should wind back where it originally came from, and I'll start with a quote from a website for another theatre I've known quite well from my childhood. So the story goes, during World War II it was suggested to Winston Churchill that he should stop investing in the arts to help pay for Britain's war effort. He was said to have responded, then what would we be fighting for? The arts are what makes living worthwhile. Without things like music, drama, paintings and dance, we'd simply be surviving. The arts aren't just the things that give pleasure to life, they are the means by which we express ourselves, connect to other people, share experiences and discover new things about ourselves, each other and the wider world around us. That came from the website for the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry. It was opened in 1958. It was built, rose from the ashes from a city that was very much destroyed. Okay, we didn't in Hamilton have destruction of physical things there like that, but I believe that the Founders Theatre was built on the ashes of the people that lived through the darkest ages of the last century. I think we do a disfavour to those people if we just march in and just put business and those sort of things in there. I think Founders Theatre is an important facility for Hamilton, and I was quite surprised to find that it actually is not under our assessment of our historic buildings, our thing of historic buildings for Hamilton. And I've got the heritage assessment criteria in front of me, and whether it's history or not, I believe it is in history, and historic places, according to the rankings, are places of highly significant heritage value, including those assessed as being outstanding of high value in relation to one or more of the criteria. And those criteria include historic qualities. Associated value to the historic place has a direct association with or relationship to a person, group or institution, event or activity that is of historical significance to Hamilton, the Waikato or New Zealand. I believe the Founders Theatre has an association with the people that had the vision to build it, to put behind the horrors that they've been through, and it has a historical significance to the place. The architects that built it, White, Delisle and Jenkins, were, and still are, names well known in Hamilton. Okay, it may not be historic in the same extent that some people think of it and its style, but it was built in a contemporary style. It's got Ralph Hotery's artwork in there, which is a significant piece of artwork. It has distinctive and special attributes as an aesthetic or functional nature. But of course, things move on. Time has moved on. We need to move with the times and make something that's more appropriate for current days. So perhaps we should rebuild it somewhere, remembering the founders and the people that built it and the forefathers of the city that thought fit to put something back into the city. So I support rebuilding it somewhere, whether it's on an existing site or somewhere else. Make it an iconic building.
Okay, fantastic. Roger, questions? Councillor Mallett.
Thank you, Roger. We've heard talk of Founders being inaccessible. Can you get into Founders Theatre?
I can get into the Founders Theatre. It's not perfect. Yeah, they've made facilities for a few there.
So there's a lift or something up for you to
There's
get
a
up
lift that can get into
Okay.
a few seats there. I've made submissions to annual plans and people like that to say, can we make that road more accessible all the way along? It's not a minor thing to get more seating there, but it can be done. They've done it. Another theatre that I was researching the other day was the Stratford Memorial Theatre, for Shakespeare Memorial Theatre in Stratford. That's gone through a £112 million refit over the last few years, and that is now fully accessible. And they also made an iconic viewing tower there for people to see, and also, you know, they've built what they call the other place and made it quite a feature. Okay.
What was the cost for that?
They spent £112 million on it, but the Belgrade Theatre I was talking about.
Well, this
before,
is in England. You're talking
that's
about
in England, yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were Stratford in the Taranaki.
No.
In the Naki.
No.
Wrong country.
Wrong country, yeah.
Okay, that's where the pounds come from, and that's where the number comes from, clearly. Okay, back in New Zealand.
Okay, and sorry, the second, at the end, you started talking about heritage with regard to which kind of contradicts your suggestion that we build again, but rebuild. I'm just confused on what you're saying.
At the beginning, we had this earthquake in Christchurch. People are saying it is unsafe. If we believe them, then perhaps we have got to put a lot of money into upgrading it. If it really is the case that it is sufficiently unsafe and it doesn't warrant it, we should build another Founders Theatre somewhere else to respect the memory of the people that built it. And I suggested, I think in my submission, that perhaps if we did that, it should be down by the riverside somewhere to make advantage of the river we've got here.
So your comments about the heritage, what sort of weight were you wanting us to take on with regard to that? You spoke quite passionately about the heritage of it, and then you sort of seemed to toss it all out and let's build again.
If it is possible to build it, to rebuild or do something on the present site with that structure and keep the essence of it, then I'll be very strongly in favour of that option as opposed to going somewhere else. But if it really is uneconomic to keep it going and we really do have to replace it with something else, then go elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, there's no other questions. Thank you, Roger. Thank you very much for coming on, and also thank you for coming up the list too. We greatly appreciate that. All right. So, councillors, there are no others? No. So, Staff are working to bring people up the list because we are well ahead of time. So what we're going to do is have lunch now, and we're going to come back. I'm thinking 1 o'clock.
We will endeavour to have
as you know,
available.
Keep pushing the list hard.
Yeah, so people are making phone calls and everything. So we're going to come back at 1 o'clock. But I have asked since I arrived this morning that they work the phones to bring people forward, because as you know, generally about a third don't come. So you know, you have to work on that number. But very kindly, people from tomorrow are saying that they will come forward to today. So that's positive, isn't it? All right, so we're adjourned until 1.